What's up? It's Tom. Thanks for clicking on this video. Twin case you missed it. The Twins have made a couple trades. The big one being Jhoan Duran has been sent to the Philadelphia Phillies. Before I kind of break that down and talk about the return, just a toast to you, Jhoan Duran. You're not the reason why the Twins have found themselves in this situation to be selling by any means. So good luck in Philadelphia. We're wishing you the best of luck. Phillies fans, be nice to our boy, okay? Take good care of him. Any Phillies fans here, Jhoan Duran. All right, so now that we got that part out of the way, let's break this trade down. The Twins send Duran to the Phillies to help kind of save their bullpen, which was a mess today in particular. But, I'm sure plenty of teams had interest in Duran. Great relief arm. Mick Abel is coming back, starting pitcher who has reached the big leagues. And Eduardo Tait is a 18-year-old catcher we'll talk about. I actually think, you would think maybe the big league guy would be the centerpiece. But I actually think in terms of value, Eduardo Tait has way more value than Mick Abel. We'll kind of touch on that a little bit more in a moment. But first, I just want to share this post that I put out on the 23rd, so about a week ago, that, after kind of thinking about it, I sort of took the stance that, I would aggressively shop any relievers, even guys with multiple years of team control, like Jhoan Duran. Didn't specifically name him here, but obviously I was referring to Duran and Griffin Jacks in this year's context. But I really feel like that's the case in general. They are the least reliable, least consistent, and easiest to replace elements of any MLB roster. That's not to say it's easy. Just because I think it's the easiest thing to do doesn't really mean it's easy. But, look at how the Twins have done in the Derek Falvey era. They have really not invested that much in bullpens, and they've consistently built pretty good bullpens. I just think if you're going to take pieces away from even your future, if it's coming from somewhere, I'm not going to sweat it being the bullpen. Let's talk about the return, though. Mick Abel, the guy coming back, former first-round pick, high school drafted starting pitcher. So he's pretty young still, only 23 years old in the big leagues. You can see they're 6.3 years younger than the average big leaguer. And he struggled, to be honest. 5.04 ERA. Not a ton of strikeouts. His walks, actually, I have that highlighted in green because that's my biggest concern with Mick Abel. And actually, he's not walking as many guys in his big league time as he did in the minors. A 5.1 walk per nine in the minor leagues. Even with that nice 10.5 K per nine, that's a huge red flag for me. Yes, there are some guys who can improve their control as they age. It's not very likely, in my opinion. It's not very common. It's not something you want to bank on. I don't have high. Again, Mick Abel to me is clearly the second piece in this deal. It's nice that he's reached the major leagues already, so he's potentially going to contribute to the Twins as soon as this year, and definitely in next year's picture for sure. And this is a guy who does have an interesting arm, a big arm, good velo, especially for a starting pitcher. His touch like 98 as a starting pitcher. And, if we want to kind of break it down, this guy did something that Jhoan Duran couldn't. Jhoan Duran could not make it to the majors as a starter. He could not make it to the majors as a starter. Mick Abel, for all of his faults, made it to the major leagues as a starting pitcher on a good team. It's not like he was on a terrible team either on the Phillies. So, I think that's a piece to consider. And even though I'm kind of throwing a wet blanket on Mick Abel a little bit, I don't see, I'm going to compare him to Jhoan Duran, but I want to make sure to point out, number one, I'd always take the known quantity. So I'm not saying Mick Abel, he could just step right in and be Jhoan Duran next year. It's possible, but I'm not suggesting that it's all that likely. So I want to make that clear. And then, yes, Mick Abel made it to the majors as a starter. Jhoan Duran did not. But I think if you just strip everything away, you would say Jhoan Duran has more big league plus pitches than Mick Abel does. So those are two big differentiators. I wanted to throw those out there because this next statement would sound a little bit crazy without it. But do I think it's unthinkable that if you stuck Mick Abel in the bullpen in a single inning role, if he could be maybe not Jhoan Duran, but if he could be a good major league reliever next season, if you wanted, and basically replace Jhoan Duran in the bullpen, not as the closer, not as the highest leverage guy, but sort of help I think he could. I think he could. We'll find out what his future role is going to be. Again, he's very young. I think the Twins still have plenty of incentive to try to continue to develop him as a starter for a bit more. But bullpen as a fallback option with his fastball. Again, I don't think he has a lot else going on other than his fastball. I don't love his breaking balls. He clearly isn't very comfortable with his changeup. So we'll see there. But not a guy without intrigue, Mick Abel. Eduardo Tait is by far the guy I'm way more intrigued by. He is catching now. I don't know that it's all that likely he will be a catcher, but this guy looks like he has middle of the lineup type potential as a hitter. Already in high A as an 18-year-old, which is pretty crazy. Hitting for a lot of power. He's not been the biggest on-base guy, especially since he's moved into full season leagues. Definitely more so. He looks like selling out for his power, but the power, especially for a teenage kid, is there. And he's said to have a big arm. I haven't scouted him much behind the plate myself. I've mostly just read scouting reports on him and watched him hit some. So maybe the baseline tools are there for him to catch. So you see why that's the path he's on right now. I don't know of any 18-year-old catchers who you can say like, oh, he's a lock to stay back there. None of them are. They're all like this. So, Eduardo Tait, he's so far away. That's the only thing. I'll get to that conversation in a moment. So, is he going to stick a catcher? Maybe not. But does his value completely hinge on that? No. Because this guy can really hit. So, really intriguing prospect. If you look at, speaking of relievers, you can look back 2 years. People are kind of hung up on Duran having a couple more years of team control. I totally get that. But if you look back 2 years ago at the best relievers in 2023, a lot of those guys have not been good since then. And mostly it's due to injury. I'm, again, rooting for Duran. I want him to do well. I would love to see him do well. I would love to see him have a happy time in Philadelphia these next couple of years, but I would not be surprised if he gets injured. I would not be surprised if he doesn't maintain this level of success, because I would say that about every single relief pitcher. It's not really anything against Duran in particular. I would say the same thing about Griffin Jacks. I would say the same thing about 99.9% of other relievers, essentially. So, when you're in a team that's not in it, and you can potentially pick up an Eduardo Tait, who some places have as a top 50 overall prospect, and a Mick Abel, who's been in the majors, who's a former top 100 prospect, who's a piece of intrigue, I think that's hard to walk away from. So kind of to wrap things up, the big questions, do I think the Twins got good value? Yes, I do think the Twins got good value, but from a Twins fan perspective and thinking about the future and the not too distant future, it would have been nice if most of that value was in more of a guy maybe in Double-A, in the high minors, rather than an 18-year-old miles away from the big leagues. And yes, Mick Abel could he's going to get assigned to St. Paul for now, but I bet you he'll be on the Twins by the end of the season for sure. So we are going to see a piece of this trade in the majors, but the biggest piece, Tait, is so far away. So did they get good value? Yes. Does the value package really make sense for, I think, what the Twins should be targeting? I guess not. Which side has more risk? Even with me saying that about Duran and about injuries and about reliever performance, if you want to flip that conversation I had about looking back 2 years ago at the best relievers and how they've done, you can have that same conversation with prospects. Look back 2 years ago at some top 50 prospects. A lot of those guys haven't panned out. So it's not like these guys are slam dunks either. The Twins side, in my opinion, has much more risk. I could see this end up being a huge win for the Twins. It's not like I can't envision that, because if they can figure out Mick Abel and get him throwing more strikes, he becomes way more interesting than I painted him up. And maybe they have some things they think they can do with him. I don't know. Would I have done this trade? I would have. I'm not sure if this is the trade that would have got done if I was in charge, because I might have tried to prioritize something else with a primary piece that was closer to the majors. But if this was the best I could do, and it was either take this trade or walk away and keep Duran, I would have done this trade, to be honest. Am I happy about this trade, though? You would think, well, you must be if that's the case. No, I'm not happy about this trade. I'm not happy that the Twins are trading away major league pieces at all. let alone guys that should be contributing to the team for the next 2 years. I hate the situation that the Twins are in right now. I'm super frustrated with this. I had planned on doing some trade primer stuff, deadline primer stuff, even expecting the Twins to be sellers, and I just haven't been able to bring myself to do it because it's too damn depressing. This sucks. It sucks to trade away one of your, biggest draws, one of your most exciting players. I get why the Twins are taking these steps, but it sucks, and something's got to change. Something has to change. We can't keep doing this. Obviously, the ownership thing, whether that's actually ever going to happen or not, who knows? But that is a side subject. Leadership's got to change. Absolutely. Something has to change with leadership in this organization. So, no, I'm not happy about this trade, despite having some positive things to say about that. Twins, what's in the closing moments, let's talk about the Twins' other trade. They sent Chris Paddock and Randy Dobnak to the Tigers for a lower-level catching prospect. I think that was all about getting money off the books, but that was fine, whatever. Chris Paddock, Randy Dobnak, you're not really going to miss those guys. Paddock was a pending free agent. That the guy they got seems kind of interesting, so, that seems like a win just to get an interesting piece back for those guys, but just not fun. Not fun to be a Twins fan right now, even with some shiny new toys entering the system. You'd think I'm a prospects guy. I'd love that, but I'd much rather see the Twins winning and trading away prospects, to be honest, completely honest. Thanks for checking this out. Just figured I'd give myself a chance to vent and maybe give you guys some venting time too. Let me know what you think. We'll talk again probably soon. You're probably going to see me cry about Willie Castro sometime soon. So be on the lookout for that one.